My name is Yolanda Reeves, and I was 68 the night my son asked me to disappear. He didn't say it that way. He said it over roast chicken while his wife refilled the wine glasses. We need you to retire early. We can't afford daycare. I set my leather folder on the table and folded my hands. I didn't open it. Not yet. They thought the worst part of that dinner was my answer. It wasn't. The worst part was already sitting inside their own paperwork and in what they'd quietly decided to do with my house. Stay with me. That spreadsheet wasn't the cruelest thing on the table that night. Not even close. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories, where women who are underestimated finally get the last quiet word. If a calm voice and a hard truth sound like justice to you, you're home. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. The invitation came by text on a Tuesday. Sunday dinner, Mom. 6. It's important. Bradley never wrote it's important. My son called when he wanted something and texted when he felt guilty. I'm a numbers person, 40 years of it. I keep the books for 3 small companies and I still wake at 5 to read balance sheets before coffee. People assume a woman my age is winding down. I let them assume. That week, a thick envelope had landed in my mailbox. Papers I'd been asked to look over and sign again. A favor from 3 years back that wouldn't quite stay finished. I slid the pages into a worn leather folder, ox blood red, soft at the corners. I brought it to dinner without deciding why. I drove the 20 minutes to their neighborhood with the folder on the passenger seat. Gated entrance, a guard who waved me through, lawns trimmed to the inch. Megan's car was already in the drive. My daughter Bradley's younger sister, a labor and delivery nurse who works doubles and still shows up early. Beside it sat a sedan. I recognized Coral's Vanessa's mother. I sat in the car a moment and looked at the house. 2 new SUVs, a wreath on the door, though it was only October. A family dinner with the daughter-in-law's mother invited, and my own daughter looking tense in the window. I put on my reading glasses to check the time on my phone, then took them off again. Whatever this was, it had been arranged carefully, and I was the only one at the table who didn't yet know the agenda. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary and money. The kitchen island was a slab of marble big enough to land a plane on. Theo was asleep down the hall, 10 months old, all cheeks, the monitor humming softly on the counter. Vanessa hugged me lightly and reached for the wine. Red. Okay, Yolanda, she filled 3 glasses before anyone answered. Yolanda's been such a lifesaver with Theo on Tuesdays, she told the room, smiling. Coral nodded like it was scripture. I said thank you. I didn't correct her. Tuesdays were news to me. Bradley came in loud, the way he gets when he's nervous. Mom, you won't believe the quarter I'm having. He listed a deal he'd closed, a number with too many zeros. A trip to Scottsdale for the President's Club. I'd raised him on store-brand cereal and library books. I know the difference between a man who has money and a man who needs you to know he has money. On the refrigerator, under a magnet shaped like a lemon, a slip of paper caught my eye. Montessori, I'm deposit due Friday. $5,000 non-refundable. $5,000 for a deposit on a Tuesday. Megan caught me reading it and looked away. We sat. Cloth napkins, a roast that cost more than my first car payment. Coral talked about her cruise. Vanessa refilled her own glass and watched Bradley like a woman waiting for a cue. I ate slowly and counted things. It's a habit. 2 leased SUVs in the drive, a $5,000 deposit on the fridge, and a son who couldn't meet my eyes across his own beautiful table. Dessert came out, a tart no one had baked. Bradley set down his fork and squared his shoulders like a man about to pitch. Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something together. He glanced at Vanessa. About Theo, about the future. I'm listening, I said. Daycare is insane right now, almost $2,000 a month for an infant. We've run the numbers. He swallowed. We need you to retire early. We can't afford daycare. The table went still. Even the monitor seemed to hold its breath. I laughed. Not unkindly, just a soft, surprised little laugh. The kind you give when a child says something earnest and impossible. That's funny, I said. You can't afford daycare on $280,000 a year. Vanessa's smile tightened. It's not about the money, Yolanda. It's about family. It's about what's best for Theo. A baby shouldn't be raised by strangers, Coral added. Not when he has a grandmother who could. Could, such a small word, doing such heavy lifting. Bradley leaned in earnest. You'd be home with him. You're winding down anyway, it just makes sense. Winding down. I keep the books for 3 companies and balance them to the penny. But sure, winding down. I looked at the 4 of them. My son hopeful, his wife coiled, Coral righteous, and Megan staring at her plate like it might rescue her. Before I answer that, I said, and I kept my voice level, let me understand the numbers. I reached for my water, not the folder. Not yet, because the moment I opened that folder, this dinner would stop being theirs. Let me tell you who I am so the rest makes sense. I married at 22 and divorced at 41. When Bradley was 11 and Megan was 7, their father left for a woman who laughed at his jokes. I kept the kids and a mortgage, and not much else. So, I learned accounting at night, bookkeeping by day, classes after the dishes, ledgers at the kitchen table until my eyes burned. I made store-brand cereal taste like enough. I never once told my children we were drowning because they didn't need to carry it. Bradley remembers the late nights differently. He remembers a mother who was always at work. I've heard him say it. Light as a joke. Mom was married to her job. I let that one go too. I let a lot go where my son is concerned. That's my flaw if you want the honest version. Not vanity, not fear of being called selfish. I just never wanted to be one more person who made his life harder. 3 years ago, when he and Vanessa found that house, the bank balked at the size of the loan. So they asked me to sign on too as a guarantor and to lend them the down payment, $90,000. I had it. I trusted them. I drew up a simple note for the loan and signed beside their names on the mortgage. I never imagined I would need any of it. The envelope in my folder was the bank's. A refinance package, new papers, my signature required again. I'd brought it to read carefully on my own time. I ended up reading it that very night at that very table with all of them watching. Vanessa sat down her fork and folded her hands, mirroring mine. She'd noticed I do that. Yolanda, can I be honest? She said. People who ask that rarely are. Strangers raise kids for money. Family does it out of love. Theo deserves love. He has love, I said. From his parents, from me. Love and labor aren't the same thing. Coral made a small scandalized sound. In our family, she said, the grandmothers step up. My mother raised my children half the week. It's an honor. Was she paid? I asked. Coral blinked. Of course not. It was family. I noted that. I note everything. Vanessa glanced down at her phone, face up beside her plate, then up at her mother. A quick look, the kind that passes between two people who've rehearsed. Then she turned back to me. Softer now, almost wounded. I just don't understand, she said. How a job could matter more than your own grandson. What will people think? Coral added gently. A grandmother who picks an office over a baby. There it was, the frame they'd built. Selfish old woman, cold and counting, choosing spreadsheets over a child's chubby arms. Bradley said nothing. He pushed hard around his plate and let his wife and her mother do the work. I felt the pull of it. I want to be honest about that. The fear of being the villain in your own family story is a real thing, and I felt every ounce. I just didn't let it move my hand. Tell me, I said quietly. If it isn't about money, why did you open with money? Vanessa's jaw tightened and her phone face up, lit with a message she turned over before anyone could read it. Here's the piece they didn't know I'd already started to put together. That refinance package in my folder wasn't routine. I'd skimmed it the night it arrived. Banks don't refinance a loan that's doing fine. They refinance when someone needs cash out or a lower payment or both. The cover letter asked for my signature as guarantor within 60 days. 60 days. There was a date circled in the bank's own ink. I keep books for a living. I can read a household the way you read a face. And the numbers in that package told a story Bradley wasn't telling at the table. Their debt to income was worse than it had been 3 years ago. Not better. Worse. 2 new car leases. A line of credit drawn down close to its limit. A mortgage they could carry only if nothing went wrong, and something always goes wrong, and something was about to. That line of credit was months from resetting to a far higher payment. The refinance was their escape hatch. Roll the debt in, pull cash out, keep breathing. Without my signature, there was no refinance. Without the refinance, the reset would bury them. To refinance, to pull out the cash they so clearly needed. They needed me, my signature, my name beside theirs, propping up the whole arrangement one more time. So this dinner wasn't really about daycare. Daycare was the soft opening. The ask underneath the ask was bigger, and it required my cooperation in 2 ways at once. My time and my name. I looked at Bradley, my anxious, overextended son, and I understood the shape of the trap before I understood the bottom of it. When's that deposit due again? I asked, nodding at the fridge. The Montessori one. Friday, Vanessa said. And the refinance papers, I said. Those have a date too, don't they? Bradley's face changed. He hadn't expected me to know about the refinance. Neither, I think, had Vanessa. The room rearranged itself in an instant. Bradley sat up. Vanessa's wounded softness slid off her face like a wet coat. You've seen the refinance, she said. I'm a guarantor, I said mildly. The bank mails me everything. That's how guarantors work. Coral looked from her daughter to me, suddenly aware she'd walked into a conversation with a floor she couldn't see. Mom, Bradley said, recovering, reaching for warmth. That's exactly why this all fits. You're already part of it. You sign the refinance. You retire. You're with Theo every day. One beautiful solution. One beautiful solution for them. I could have said no right then. Part of me wanted to, but I've learned that no lands better with proof behind it. And I didn't have all my proof yet. I had a feeling, a folder, and 40 years of instinct. So I did what I always do. I bought time. Give me a week, I said. This is a lot to take in. Let me review everything properly before I decide. You know me. I don't sign what I haven't read. The relief in that room was almost obscene. Bradley exhaled and grinned. Vanessa squeezed his arm. Coral declared she'd known I'd come around. That family always does. Vanessa lifted her wine and said to family. And they all drank. Megan didn't lift her glass. She watched me over the rim of hers, and there was something in her eyes. A warning or a plea. I told them I'd look. I didn't tell them I'd already started, and I certainly didn't tell them what I expected to find. At home that night, I did what they'd asked. I reviewed everything. I cleared the kitchen table, the same table where I'd learned this trade 30 years ago, and I opened the leather folder. I put on my reading glasses and I built a spreadsheet. For me, that's what unwinding looks like. Tab 1, their cash flow. I had more of it than they realized because a guarantor's packet includes pay stubs, statements, the works, gross income, $280,000 after taxes and retirement. Call it 16,000 a month landing in their accounts. Real money. More than I ever saw raising 2 kids alone. Then the outflow mortgage 6,002 SUV, leases 1,400 country club, leases worth of subscriptions, and daycare. Infant care in their county ran about 1,600 a month. Real, but not impossible. I sat back and looked at it. They didn't have a daycare problem. They had a lifestyle they didn't want to touch. Drop one lease, pause the club, and the unaffordable daycare fit with room to spare. So we can't afford it wasn't poverty. It was a choice dressed up as a crisis. They could afford daycare. They simply preferred that I afford it for them in years, not dollars. I made a note in the margin and turned to a fresh tab. Outside, the street was dark and quiet. Inside, the numbers were finally starting to talk. The story they told wasn't the one I'd been served at dinner, and I was only on the first page. I know some of you are doing this exact math at your own kitchen table right now. The favor that's really a transfer, the we can't afford it. That doesn't add up. If you've ever been the family ATM dressed up as a hug, type I see it in the comments and subscribe. The rest of this story is for you. The pressure didn't wait a week. It started the next morning. Vanessa texted at 7. A photo of Theo in a high chair, oatmeal everywhere, captioned, "He needs his grandma, not a stranger. Please think about him." By noon, another really stressed about Friday, Yolanda. We're counting on you. I didn't answer. I've learned that silence is a complete sentence. Then my cousin Diane called. Honey, is everything okay with you and Bradley? I saw Vanessa's post. What post? I said. Vanessa had written something on her page. No names, just enough. Some people choose money over family. Heartbreaking when it's the people who should love your child most. So grateful for the ones who actually show up. The comments were a chorus of crying faces and sympathy for her. While I sat home, the wicked grandmother who loved her job more than a baby. It's a clever weapon. Public shame. You don't have to prove anything. You just set the stage and let the audience fill in the villain. That afternoon, Megan called and she was crying. Mom, did you see it? I saw it. They're telling everyone you're abandoning Theo. Aunt Diane thinks you've lost your mind. She paused. Mom, there's something else. Something I saw at the house. I don't know how to say it. Say it slowly, I said. Not on the phone, she said. Can I come over tonight? Bring nothing but what you saw. I told her. I hung up and looked at the spreadsheet glowing on my screen. 3 tabs now. And a daughter on her way with the things she couldn't say out loud. Megan arrived at 9, still in scrubs, her mascara worn to shadows under her eyes. I made tea. She wrapped both hands around the mug and didn't drink it. I love my brother, she said. I need you to know that first. I know it, but something's wrong over there, Mom. Not just stressed wrong. She stared into the tea. A few weeks ago, I was at their place putting Theo down. The door was cracked. Vanessa was on the phone in the next room, and her voice, it wasn't a friend voice. It was a business voice. What did she say? I only caught pieces. I told myself I misheard. Megan's hands tightened. I felt sick about it ever since. I keep hoping I'm wrong. Tell me what you think you heard. I can't, she said. Not yet. Not on half a phone call I shouldn't have heard. He's my brother. I keep praying I put it together wrong. Just Mom, please don't sign anything. Promise me not the refinance. Nothing. There are moments when a grown child looks at you the way they did when they were small, asking you to make the dark thing go away. Megan looked at me like that. I won't sign tonight, I said. And I won't sign anything I haven't earned the right to understand. She nodded and finally drank the tea. After she left, I sat back down at the table. Vanessa's business voice in a room she thought was empty. A daughter too frightened to repeat the words. Whatever Megan had heard, it was somewhere in this paperwork. I was sure of it. I just had to find the page. I went back through the package line by line, slowly, rereading every entry because something itched and wouldn't stop. I'd been looking at the big numbers, the mortgage, the leases. Now, I looked at the small ones, the recurring ones. Money tells the truth in its habits. There on 3 months of statements, the same entry, a transfer out the first of every month, $1,500. No clear label, just initials and a reference number. $1,500 a month, $18,000 a year, leaving their account like clockwork. I flipped to the spending tab in my folder and wrote it down. Circled it twice. Who gets $1,500 a month every month from a couple who claims they can't afford daycare? Not a mortgage, not a car. Those were already accounted for. This was something else, something steady, something deliberate, something they'd built into the budget and never questioned. I checked the dates. The transfers had started about 10 months ago, 10 months, Theo's age. A cold little arithmetic began at the back of my mind, the kind you don't want to finish. $1,500 a month, beginning the month the baby came home, paid to someone, while they sat at that table and told me there was no money for care. I didn't have the name yet. The statement only gave initials and a code, but I knew the shape of it now, and the shape was ugly. I drew a box around the entry and labeled it in pencil with a single word. Then I turned the page looking for the answer, and found something far worse than a name. It was 3 pages deep in the refinance package, tucked behind the appraisal, a supplemental worksheet, the kind a borrower submits to make a shaky loan look safer. Future income penciled in to strengthen the application. The header read projected rental income supporting properties. There was one property on it, one address, mine. My house, the little 3-bedroom I'd paid off at 62, the house I raised them in, written into their own income projection as a future rental property, a projected monthly rent, a projected annual figure, a note in the margin, available second quarter, pending family relocation, that was me. I was the relocation. I read it twice. The address was mine, the plan was not. I set the page down very carefully, the way you set down something hot. My hands were steady. I made sure of that. I found that steady hands help you think. This was the shape Megan couldn't say out loud. It wasn't come help with the baby. It wasn't even retire. The plan was for me to sell my home or rent it out, leave the life I'd built, move into their house as the live-in help, and let my equity, my address, my whole standing in the world get folded into a worksheet to prop up their loan. They hadn't asked me any of this. They'd already drafted it, penciled my house into their future like a line item, while serving me roast chicken and calling it love. I looked at the leather folder at the debut still circled on the page before it. 2 ugly facts now sitting side by side. I didn't cry. I didn't call Bradley. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down, and started a 3rd tab. If they wanted to talk about the future, I would bring the documents that showed exactly what they'd already decided about mine. I called Megan the next morning and told her what I'd found, the worksheet, my address, available second quarter, pending family relocation. The line went quiet for a long moment. So, I wasn't crazy, she finally said, and her voice cracked. Tell me now, I said gently, all of it. You're not the crazy one, you never were, she breathed in. The phone call I overheard. Vanessa wasn't talking to a friend, she was talking to a realtor. The words came faster now, released. She said they were getting Yolanda's place ready to list in the spring. She asked about staging, about what a 3-bedroom in your neighborhood would rent for. Did she use my name? She said, my mother-in-law's house. Like it was already theirs to sell. Megan was crying now. Mom, I didn't say anything because I thought maybe I'd heard it wrong. Who plans that about their own mother? I didn't want to believe my brother would. Your brother, I said, married a woman who plans and he let her. I wrote down the date Megan had been at the house. I matched it against the worksheet. The realtor call came 2 weeks before the refinance package was even prepared. 2 weeks. They'd called about my house before they'd ever invited me to the dinner where they would ask me to give it up. The dinner wasn't a request. It was a formality, a vote they assumed had already passed. I want to tell you I was surprised. I wasn't, not entirely. What I felt was quieter and harder than surprise. It was the click of a lock turning. The moment a thing you suspect becomes a thing you know, and the message Vanessa had turned face down at that first dinner, hidden so fast I'd have bet my license it was the realtor too, confirming the spring listing. I thanked my daughter. I told her to say nothing, to act normal, to trust me. Then I went back to the table and I built. There was a dinner coming, and this time I would come prepared. For the next 3 days, I did what I do best. I quantified. If I retired 2 years early, what would it actually cost? Not in feelings, in dollars. Real countable dollars. Tab 2. My salary across those 2 years about $190,000 gone. 2 years I wouldn't pay into Social Security, lowering my benefit for the rest of my life. The health insurance I'd lose, the retirement contributions that wouldn't compound on the labor itself. They wanted full-time infant care, so I priced it honestly at market. A nanny in their county runs $18.20 an hour, 50 hours a week, $45,000 a year. Meno for the work alone. I added it up and looked at the total. They weren't asking me for a favor. They were asking me to write them a check for roughly $250,000 in income, labor, and lost security, and to thank them for the privilege. I'll admit that's when the dry part of me woke up. They wanted a babysitter. Fine. I priced the babysitter. Turns out she's expensive, highly experienced, and inconveniently for them, she's me. I built it into clean rows: income forgone, benefits lost, labor valued, a grand total at the bottom, in bold. Because here's the thing, nobody had said plainly at that table. Love and money are not the same thing. And pretending they are is how people get robbed by the ones they trust. A gift is something you choose to give. What they wanted wasn't a gift, it was a withdrawal. And they'd already filled out the slip. I printed tab 2 and slid it behind tab 1. 2 pages done. 1 to go. And the last one still had a name on it. I had to confirm. If you're still with me, you already know the hardest math here. A son's face on one side, my own life on the other. That's the spreadsheet they never teach you to balance. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how it landed at that table. And tell me below. Would you have brought the folder or stayed home? Bradley called me Thursday night alone. I could tell no Vanessa coaching in the background. Hey, Mom? His voice was small, the voice he'd used at 11 after his father left, when he'd stand in my doorway and pretend he wasn't scared. Hi, honey. He was quiet a while. Then it came out in a rush. Mom, I'm drowning. We're so far underwater, I can't see up. The house, the cars, the deposit. Every month it's a knife fight. He exhaled. Vanessa handles our accounts. I see the panic, not the line items. Maybe I never wanted to look. For one breath, I forgot the worksheet. I forgot the realtor and the $1,500. He was just my boy, scared in the dark, and everything in me wanted to fix it. Then we fix it honestly, I said softly. You sell the house that's too big, you drop a lease. You let me help you make a real plan. I'll sit with you all weekend. No, he said quickly. No, that would look like failure. People would know. He exhaled. There's an easier way. You retire. You're with Theo. The refinance goes through and we keep everything. You worked your whole life, Mom. Now it's your turn to just be there. There it was again. The boy I loved handing me the bill for his pride. It's your turn to be there. As if the nights I worked to feed him were a debt I now owed back in my retirement. As if my whole life were a layaway plan he was finally collecting on. Let's all have dinner Sunday, he said. We'll sort it out. Everyone together? Sunday? I agreed. Everyone together. I hung up and looked at the folder. He wanted everyone together. So did I. I just don't think we wanted it for the same reason. I closed the leather cover over 3 tabs and one name I was finally ready to confirm. The name took me 1 phone call and 1 favor. A friend from my banking days still reads transaction codes the way I read them. I gave her the reference number, nothing private, just the routing pattern, and asked what kind of account it pointed to. Personal account, she said. Same bank, recurring transfer. Looks like a standing family arrangement. The memo field says childcare mom. Childcare mom. But I'm Bradley's mother and no one had ever sent me a dime, so who's mom? I already knew. I'd known since Coral sat at that table and said grandmother should step up for free. With the smooth confidence of a woman who has never once done anything for free. $1,500 a month to Coral, Vanessa's mother, for watching Theo on the days she did. I sat with that for a long minute. They were already paying for childcare, $18,000 a year, every month since Theo came home to the other grandmother. And then they'd invited me to dinner to tell me there was no money and asked me to do the same job for nothing while I sold my house to fund their loan. I pulled the daycare quote I'd saved. $1,650 a month for licensed infant care. They were paying Coral $1,500. The difference between we can't afford daycare and we already pay for childcare was $150 a month. $150 stood between their lie and the truth. And then it clicked into place. If I worked for free, they could stop paying Coral and pocket the $1,500. If I relocated, they could rent my house and float the refinance. Daycare was never the prize. I was my time, my home, my name, all of it. I wrote Coral's name on tab 3 beside the figure in ink this time. No more pencil. Then I added the rental worksheet behind it. My house, her salary, their lie, all on one page. The folder was nearly full and Sunday was 2 days away. I almost felt sorry for what was coming. Almost. I want you to picture what they were asking me to walk away from because they never did. To them, I was winding down. A nice old lady with a calculator and some free time. They had no idea what my days actually looked like. That same week, I finished something I'd worked on for 8 months. One of my clients, a family-owned distributor, 40 employees, 80 years in business, had been 3 months from closing the doors. Bleeding cash, drowning in bad inventory decisions. The owner ready to lay everyone off before Christmas. I'd gone in, opened the books, and found the leaks, renegotiated their terms, restructured their debt, cut what was killing them, and protected what was working. That Friday, the owner called me in tears. Good tears. They'd made payroll. They'd keep the doors open. 40 families would have a paycheck in January. A young analyst there, 26 and sharp, caught me on my way out. "Mrs. Reeves, you're the best with numbers I've ever seen. It's not even close." I drove home thinking about Bradley's word, winding down. The woman they wanted to retire had just saved 40 jobs from a kitchen table with a laptop. The skill they dismissed as a hobby was the same skill about to take their dinner apart. People underestimate quiet women who count things. They mistake calm for weakness and patience for permission. I let them. I've always let them. It's the cheapest advantage there is. But there's a difference between letting someone underestimate you and letting them take your house. I packed my laptop, my folder, my reading glasses. Sunday was tomorrow. I wasn't winding down, I was just getting to the part of the page that mattered. Saturday night, I assembled it like a closing binder. I'm methodical. It calms me. I printed 3 tabs on clean paper and laid them out on the table in order. Tab 1, their cash flow. Proof they could afford daycare with room to spare. $16,000 a month in and a lifestyle they wouldn't trim. Tab 2, the cost of help. $250,000 in my income, benefits, and labor. The real price of the favor they called love. $1,500 a month to Coral labeled childcare. The note in the margin, my whole future penciled into their loan. I clipped them in order and slid them into the oxblood folder. I ran my thumb along the soft, worn corner. The way you check the edge of a knife without meaning to. I wasn't going to argue on Sunday. Arguing is for people without documents. I was going to itemize. I thought about Theo, asleep down their hall, 10 months old and innocent of all of it. I wasn't doing this to him. I would never do this to him. I was doing it for the version of him who would grow up watching how his family treated the people who loved them. A boy should learn that love isn't something you can invoice your grandmother for. I set the folder by the door. I laid my reading glasses on top of it. I went to bed and slept better than I had in a week. In the morning, I'd drive the 20 minutes through the gate, past the trimmed lawns to a dinner they thought they had already won. They'd set the table. I'd bring the math. Sunday 6, the gate, the lawns, the wreath still up. They'd gone all out. Candles this time, a standing rib roast, Vanessa in pearls playing hostess. The whole cast assembled. Bradley, Vanessa, Coral, and Megan with her husband Paul, who kept his head down and his hands busy. "Yolanda, you look wonderful," Vanessa said, and reached for the bottle. She poured my wine first, then her own, filling her glass a little too high. "We're so glad you're here, so glad we can finally settle this as a family." Settle? As if it were already decided, which in their minds it was. Coral patted the chair beside her. "Come sit, dear, we were just saying how lucky Theo is, a grandmother who will be there every single day." Bradley hovered near the kitchen refilling water that didn't need refilling. His smile a size too small for his face. He couldn't look at me. A man can't look at the mother he's about to sell. I set the leather folder on the table by my plate. Closed, quiet. Vanessa's eyes flicked to it, then away. "You can put that in the other room if you like," she said. "No work tonight, just family." "I'll keep it close," I said. "You never know when you'll need to check a number." We sat. Megan caught my eye across the table and gave the smallest nod. I told her to stay quiet and let it unfold. She was holding to it barely. Coral lifted her glass. "To family stepping up," she said. "They drank. I didn't. I waited. The roast steamed, the monitor hummed down the hall, and I let them think they were running the evening for now. They didn't make it to dessert this time. Vanessa was too impatient. "So?" she said, setting down her fork. "You've had your week. You've reviewed everything like you wanted." A thin smile. "We need an answer tonight, Yolanda. The refinance is due and the daycare waitlist won't hold. We just need to know you're with us," Bradley said. "That you're family." I folded my hands. "I have reviewed everything," I said very carefully. Something in my tone made Vanessa sit up. She'd expected tears or guilt or a grateful old woman. She got a level voice and a closed folder, and it unsettled her. So she reached for her best weapon, the one that had worked on me my whole life, the one that had kept me quiet, accommodating, afraid of being the bad guy. "You know," she said loud enough for the table, "a real grandmother wouldn't put a spreadsheet over her own grandson." The room went quiet. Coral nodded, satisfied. Bradley winced but said nothing. They thought she'd landed the killing blow. A real grandmother wouldn't put a spreadsheet over her own grandson. I let the sentence sit there in the candlelight. I let it be as ugly as it was. Then the first reached up unhurried and put on my reading glasses. The whole table watched me do it. To them it looked like stalling. An old woman fussing, buying time, working up the nerve to fold. Vanessa even smiled, certain she'd won. She didn't know what the glasses meant. In 40 years no one had ever wanted to sit across the table from me once I put them on. "You're right, Vanessa," I said, settling them on my nose. "Let's not talk about feelings." My hand moved to the folder. "Let's talk facts," I said. I pulled the leather folder to the center of the table between the roast and the candles where everyone could see it. The ox blood cover, soft at the corners, sitting on Vanessa's good linen like a stone dropped in a fountain. "You've all been very patient with me," I said. "The winding down grandmother. Let me return the courtesy. I did exactly what you asked. I reviewed everything." "Mom," Bradley started. "You wanted an answer tonight," I said. "You'll get a complete one with sources." Coral let out a small laugh, the nervous kind. "Yolanda, really, there's no need to make a production." "There's every need," I said. "You ask me to make the biggest financial decision of my life. I don't make those on a feeling. Neither should you." I rested my hand flat on the folder. I could feel every eye in the room land on it. Megan had gone still. Paul had stopped chewing. Vanessa's smile had finally fully died. "Before I decide whether I can afford to retire," I said, "let's look at what you can afford together as a family." I unclipped the cover. "Tab 1, I said, and I opened the folder. What slid into the candlelight wasn't a feeling or a guilt trip or an old woman's fear. It was the truth in clean rows with their own names at the top of every column. "Tab 1 is your cash flow," I said. "Your numbers, not mine." I turned the first page so it faced them and read it plainly. $280,000 a year. After taxes, about $16,000 a month into your accounts. I tapped the rows. Mortgage $6,000. 2 SUV leases, $1,400. The club $800. Dining and travel another $2,000. Vanessa reached for the page. I didn't stop her. I had copies. "Infant daycare in this county," I went on, "runs about $1,600 a month, $19,000 a year." I looked up over my glasses. "You can afford that easily. Drop one lease and pause the club and it's covered with room to spare." "You don't understand our expenses," Bradley said, color rising in his face. "I understand them perfectly. I have your statements. I'm a guarantor." Remember, I kept my voice even, almost kind. "You don't have a daycare problem, Bradley." I let the pause do its work. "You have a Tahoe problem." Paul made a sound into his napkin that might have been a cough. Megan looked at her plate to hide her face. Vanessa's cheeks went blotchy. "So we like nice things. That's a crime now." "Not at all," I said. "Like, whatever you can pay for, but don't hand me a $5,000 deposit and say there's no money. There's money. You've simply decided I should be the one to spend mine." Bradley's jaw worked. Vanessa gripped her wine glass, knuckles white. "That's tab 1, I said calmly and turned to the next page. "It only gets clearer." I slid tab 1 to the center face up where anyone with eyes could read it. "Tab 2, I said. The first lie was on the table now, and it wasn't getting back up. "Tab 2 is the cost of what you called a favor," I said. I read it the way I'd read it to a client. No drama, just rouse. "If I retire 2 years early to do this, here's what it costs me. Lost salary about $190,000, lost Social Security, I'll never make back, lost health insurance, lost retirement growth. Nobody's asking you to Vanessa started you are." I said, "That is exactly what you're asking." I turned the page toward her and the work itself. Full-time infant care at market rate is $400 a year. I priced it. That's what you'd pay a nanny. That's what you already know. It's Earth. I set my finger on the bolded total at the bottom. Add it up. You are asking me to hand you roughly $250,000. I looked at my son and to say thank you for the chance. Vanessa's voice climbed. This is insane. You're putting a price tag on your own grandchild. No, I said. And I did not raise my voice. I lowered it. You did that months ago. I'm only reading you the receipt. Something shifted in the room when she got loud and I got quiet. Coral felt it and stopped nodding. Bradley felt it and looked for the first time, truly afraid. A favor is something you give, I said. What you've described is something you take. There's a word for taking money under the cover of love. It isn't family, you're twisting everything. Vanessa hissed. I haven't said one untrue thing, I said. And I haven't even reached tab 3.